My son Daniel's voice was cold when Dr. Harrison called him from the emergency room, explaining that his father had been in a devastating car accident and was bleeding out. "Dad needs blood immediately, AB negative, or he won't survive the night," the doctor had said, and Daniel's response made my blood freeze even as it drained from my body. "That's his problem." My daughter Rebecca simply hung up without a word when the doctor called her next, and lying there in that hospital bed, barely conscious, I realized my own children had refused to help when I needed them most. 7 days later, they discovered who really inherited everything. They never saw it coming. But 24 hours earlier, everything had been different. The afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window of my Pennsylvania home, casting warm golden rectangles across the worn wooden table where Helen and I had shared 23 years of breakfasts, arguments, reconciliations, and dreams. I was preparing chicken parmesan, Daniel's favorite since he was 7 years old. The smell of garlic and oregano filling every corner of the house the way it used to when Helen was alive. The recipe was hers, written on a grease-stained index card in her careful handwriting, and I followed it religiously every time, measuring each ingredient as if her ghost stood beside me, approving or correcting with that gentle smile she'd had. The doorbell rang at exactly 4:30. Daniel was never late. He stood on the porch in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. His hair slicked back with some expensive product that caught the light. Behind him, Rebecca adjusted her designer purse, one of those leather things with a name I couldn't pronounce, her heels clicking against the concrete as she shifted her weight from foot to foot. "Dad." Daniel's embrace was brief, professional, the kind of hug you give a business associate. Rebecca's was even shorter. Her perfume was overwhelming, floral and cloying, nothing like the simple lavender Helen used to wear. "Come in, come in." I stepped aside, ushering them into the living room where I'd arranged everything just so. The good china was on the table, the set Helen and I had received as a wedding gift from her mother, each piece carefully preserved through 3 decades of careful use. Wine glasses stood ready, catching the afternoon light. I'd even bought fresh flowers for the centerpiece, yellow roses because Rebecca had once mentioned they were her favorite, though that was years ago and perhaps her tastes had changed. They settled onto the couch, and something in their posture made my chest tighten. Daniel's jaw was set in that particular way he had when he wanted something. Rebecca's fingers drummed against her thigh, a nervous tell she'd had since childhood, the same gesture she'd made before asking for a car, for college tuition, for help with her first apartment deposit. "How's work, Daniel?" I brought out the appetizers bruschetta with tomatoes from my garden, olive tapenade, crackers arranged in careful circles. "Good. Really good, actually." He took a piece of bruschetta, bit into it without really tasting it. "The market's been volatile, but we're managing." Rebecca nodded, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Brandon's firm is doing well too. They just landed a major contract." Brandon was her husband, a lawyer I'd met twice at family gatherings where he'd spent most of his time on his phone, responding to emails with the single-minded focus of someone who found his work more interesting than his in-laws. We made small talk for another 20 minutes. The weather unusually warm for October. The news always depressing. The neighborhood, Mrs. Patterson's cat had died. The Johnsons were selling their house. Normal, surface-level conversation that felt like walking on eggshells, each sentence carefully constructed to avoid whatever landmine was waiting to explode. When I brought out the main course, Daniel and Rebecca exchanged a glance. The kind of silent communication that siblings develop over years of conspiring together, of sharing secrets and strategies. My hands, suddenly unsteady, nearly dropped the serving dish. "This looks great, Dad." Rebecca's voice was too bright, artificially cheerful. "Your mother's recipe." I set down the dish, took my seat at the head of the table. "She always said the secret was in the sauce. You had to simmer it for at least 3 hours." They ate quickly, efficiently, barely tasting Helen's carefully perfected dish. I'd spent hours preparing it, stirring the sauce every 15 minutes the way she taught me, making sure the pasta was cooked exactly al dente, grating fresh Parmesan because the pre-shredded kind never tasted right. They might as well have been eating cafeteria food. "So, Dad." Daniel set down his fork, wiped his mouth with the cloth napkin Helen had embroidered with our initials. "We need to talk about something." The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. "We've been thinking." Rebecca's hand found Daniel's across the table. "About the house. About your finances. About the future." I took a sip of wine. The Merlot I'd carefully selected tasted like metal. "What about them?" "You're getting older." Daniel leaned forward. 73 now, right? "And living alone in this big house, it's not safe. Not practical." "I'm fine." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I manage perfectly well." "Do you?" Rebecca's tone carried an edge. "What about last month when you fell in the garden? Or when you forgot to turn off the stove?" "I stumbled. Once. And the stove incident was because the phone rang while I was cooking." Each word came out defensive, angry. "I'm not senile. No one's saying you are." Daniel's voice was smooth, practiced. The voice he probably used with difficult clients. "We're just concerned. About your well-being. About this house that's way too big for one person." The truth settled in my stomach like a stone. "You want me to sell the house?" "We think it would be best." Rebecca wouldn't look at me. "You could move into a nice retirement community. Something smaller, more manageable. With other people your age." "This is my home." The words came out harder than I intended. "Helen and I bought this house 42 years ago. We raised you here. Every room has memories, your first steps, Christmas mornings, Helen teaching you to bake in that kitchen. This is where she died, where I held her hand while she—" "Dad." Daniel cut me off. "We're not asking you to do this for us. This is for you." The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. "And the money from the sale? Where would that go?" Daniel and Rebecca exchanged another glance. This one lasted longer. "Well, naturally, some of it would go toward your retirement facility." Daniel spoke carefully, each word measured. "But you have more than you need. The house is worth at least $800,000 in the current market, probably more. After your expenses, there would be significant assets remaining." "Assets?" I repeated the word flatly. "We're not saying you should give us the money." Rebecca's voice was urgent now, pleading. "Just that it could be put to better use. Daniel's firm is looking at some incredible investment opportunities. And Brandon and I are trying to start a business." "A business?" The room tilted slightly. "What kind of business?" "A consulting firm." Rebecca's words came faster now. "Brandon has connections and we've identified a gap in the market. But startup costs are significant, and traditional lending has been difficult with the economy." "How much?" I didn't recognize my own voice. Silence stretched between us. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly, counting out the seconds of my stupidity. My blind hope that this visit was actually about concern for my well-being. 500,000. Daniel said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "Just as a loan, of course. We'd pay you back with interest." $500,000. I set down my wine glass before I could drop it. "That's more than half the house value." "But you don't need all that money, Dad." Rebecca's voice carried an edge now, desperation creeping into her carefully modulated tone. "You have your pension, Social Security. What are you going to do with $800,000? Sit on it until you die and leave it all to charity." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Leave it all to charity." As if it was absurd to do anything but give it to them. "You know what I sacrificed for you both?" My hands shook. I gripped the edge of the table. "After your mother died, I gave up everything. The promotion to regional manager that would have meant relocating. I turned it down because you needed stability. I worked double shifts at the plant for 7 years to pay for Rebecca's college. I took out a second mortgage to bail Daniel out of his business disaster when he was 25. That was your choice." Daniel's voice was cold. "No one forced you to make those sacrifices." "You're right." Something inside me cracked. "No one forced me. I did it because I loved you. Because I thought—" The words stuck in my throat. "I thought family meant something. This is exactly why we're worried about you." Rebecca stood abruptly. "You're getting emotional over a simple business discussion." This kind of irrationality is exactly why we think you need help managing your affairs. Get out. The words came out quiet. Dad, get out. I was standing now, my voice echoing through Helen's carefully decorated dining room. Both of you. Now. Daniel stood slowly, his face hardening into the same expression he'd had as a teenager when I'd grounded him, entitled rage barely contained behind a mask of wounded dignity. Rebecca grabbed her purse, her heels clicking rapidly toward the door. This is a mistake, Dad. Daniel paused in the doorway. When you calm down and think rationally, you'll realize we're right. We'll talk again when you're feeling more reasonable. The door closed behind them. The house fell silent except for the ticking clock and my ragged breathing. I looked at the table, at the chicken parmesan congealing on the plates, Helen's good china smeared with sauce, at the wine glasses still half full, at the yellow roses in the centerpiece that Rebecca probably hadn't even noticed. The photograph on the mantel caught my eye. Daniel and Rebecca, maybe 7 and 9 years old, at the state fair. Their faces were smudged with cotton candy, their eyes bright with joy. Daniel had won a stuffed bear at the ring toss and carried it proudly all day. Rebecca had insisted on riding the Ferris wheel 5 times. We'd stayed until the sun set and the lights came on, transforming the fairgrounds into a magical wonderland. That night, carrying a sleeping Rebecca to the car while Daniel dozed against Helen's shoulder, I'd thought, this is what life is about. These moments, this love. When had it changed? When had my children transformed from those cotton candy sticky kids into strangers who looked at me and saw only dollar signs? I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for years, subtle at first and then increasingly obvious. Daniel's visits always coincided with financial difficulties. A bad investment, an unexpected expense, a temporary cash flow problem. Rebecca's calls always seemed to happen right before major purchases. A house, a car, a vacation to Europe. But I'd made excuses, justified it, because they were my children, and wasn't that what parents did? Support their kids no matter what? Helen would have seen through it. She'd always been better at reading people, at seeing past the words to the intentions beneath. She'd questioned whether we should buy Daniel that Camaro when he turned 21, whether we should pay off Rebecca's credit card debt the 3rd time she'd maxed it out. You're enabling them, she'd said, sitting on this same couch, her hands folded in her lap the way they were when she was worried but trying not to be controlling. They need to learn responsibility. They're young, I'd argued. They'll grow out of it. But they hadn't grown out of it. They'd grown into it, becoming more entitled and demanding with each year, each handout, each crisis I'd solved for them. I cleaned up the dinner slowly, scraping uneaten food into the trash, hand-washing Helen's good china with careful attention to each piece. The mechanical actions gave my mind space to process, to accept what I'd been denying for too long. My children didn't love me. They loved what I could provide. The realization should have hurt more. Instead, it settled over me like a heavy blanket. Not comforting, exactly, but familiar in its weight. I was driving home from the grocery store, the car filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the ingredients for tomorrow's dinner. The sun was setting, painting the Pennsylvania sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful, peaceful. I was thinking about Helen, about how she'd loved sunsets like this. The truck came out of nowhere. I saw it for maybe half a second, a massive semi, running the red light at the intersection of Maple and 4th. No time to brake, no time to swerve. Just enough time to understand what was about to happen. The impact was like being hit by a building. The sound, metal tearing, glass exploding, my own scream, all merged into one terrible roar. My car spun, metal shrieking as it scraped across asphalt. The driver's side door crumpled inward, the jagged edge tearing through my left arm and side like a blade. Then silence. I couldn't move. Something warm ran down my face, blood. I realized distantly. My left side was pinned against twisted metal, sharp edges cutting deep into my flesh. Pain radiated through my body in waves, each one worse than the last. The blood kept coming, hot and sticky, soaking through my clothes, pooling in the seat beneath me. The windshield was gone. Through the shattered frame, I could see the darkening sky. Still beautiful, I thought absurdly. Still peaceful despite everything. People were shouting, running. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sir? Sir? Can you hear me? A woman's face appeared above me. Young, terrified. Don't move. The ambulance is coming. You're going to be okay. I tried to answer but only managed a groan. My vision blurred, darkened at the edges. The blood wouldn't stop. It just kept flowing, draining away with each heartbeat. Too much blood. Way too much blood. Stay with me, the woman begged. Please stay with me. They're almost here. But the darkness was so inviting, so peaceful, like sinking into warm water. Helen's face materialized in my dimming vision, not as she'd been at the end, gaunt and pale from the cancer, but as she was in our wedding photo. Young, radiant, laughing at something I'd said. Her eyes held mine with an expression I couldn't read. Understanding? Forgiveness? Not yet. The sirens became deafening. Hands pulled at me, carefully extracting me from the twisted metal. Pain exploded through my body, bright and sharp enough to drag me back from the edge. Severe lacerations, someone said. Professional, detached. Left arm, torso, possible arterial involvement. He's losing blood fast. We need to move now. The ambulance ride was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. I faded in and out, catching fragments. Blood pressure dropping. Type AB negative. Need immediate transfusion. Get or ready. I woke to white ceiling tiles and the beep of medical equipment. The hospital. They'd saved me. Somehow, impossibly, they'd saved me. My entire left side was one continuous ache. Tubes ran from my arms to 4 bags. A monitor beeped steadily, translating my damaged body into electronic sound. Bandages covered my arm and torso, white gauze wrapped tight to hold me together. Mr. Mitchell. A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. Mid-40s, tired eyes, a name tag that read Dr. Harrison. You're awake. Good. You gave us quite a scare. What? My voice came out as a croak. The accident. You were hit by a semi-truck that ran a red light. Dr. Harrison pulled up a chair. The impact caused severe lacerations to your left arm and torso. Deep tissue damage, arterial bleeding. You lost nearly half your blood volume before we could stabilize you. We had you in surgery for 3 hours repairing the damage. Nearly died. The phrase echoed in my head, hollow and strange. My children. I called them. Dr. Harrison's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. Both of them. As your emergency contacts. Something in his tone made what was left of my chest tighten. And Dr. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. The monitor beeped. A nurse walked past the door, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Mr. Mitchell, you lost massive amounts of blood in the accident. Your blood type is AB negative, extremely rare. Only about 1% of the population. We had some reserves, but not nearly enough for the volume you needed. Your condition was critical. Without immediate transfusion, you wouldn't survive the night. So I called your son Daniel first, explained the situation. Told him we needed immediate blood donation, that you might not survive without it. Dr. Harrison looked down at his clipboard. His exact words were, "That's his problem." The monitor's beeping accelerated. Dr. Harrison noticed, reached over to adjust something on the 4. I thought perhaps I'd misheard, the doctor continued, or that there was some family issue I wasn't aware of. So I called your daughter Rebecca. She listened to my explanation and hung up without a word. Neither of them came to the hospital. The room seemed very quiet suddenly, despite the equipment noise, despite the bustle of the hospital beyond the door. We managed to secure the blood from our reserves, Dr. Harrison said. You're stable now, but I thought you should know. After he left, I lay staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them because it was easier than thinking. 43 tiles visible from my bed. Some had water stains in the corners, shapes that looked like countries on a map. Australia, Italy, something that might have been a dragon if you squinted. That's his problem. For words that summarized everything. for words that crystallized years of carefully maintained illusions into sharp, cutting truth. I thought about the Camaro I'd bought Daniel for his 21st birthday. $52,000, paid in cash because he'd wanted it immediately and couldn't wait for financing. He'd crashed it 6 months later, drunk driving, and I'd paid the $38,000 in damages rather than let him face consequences. I thought about Rebecca's wedding. $63,000 for a ceremony that lasted 3 hours. Flowers imported from Ecuador. A dress custom designed by someone whose name I couldn't remember. A reception at a hotel that cost $300 per plate. She'd wanted everything perfect, and I'd given it to her because she was my little girl and it was her special day. I thought about the business ventures I'd funded. Daniel's restaurant that folded after 8 months. $120,000 down the drain. Rebecca's boutique that never got past the planning stage, $47,000 for inventory that ended up sold at a loss on eBay. I thought about the countless smaller things. Birthday presents that grew more expensive each year because anything less felt like disappointment. Christmas gifts that had to exceed the previous year's generosity. Dinners at expensive restaurants where I always picked up the check. Vacations they assumed I'd finance because you're retired, you have time and money. And through it all, I told myself it was love. That I was being a good father. That this was what you did for family. The truth was simpler and more pathetic. I'd been buying their attention, trading money for the illusion of affection. And when I'd needed them, actually needed them, life and death, not just wanted their company or their gratitude, they couldn't even be bothered to give blood. The nurse came in to check my vitals. She was young, probably younger than Rebecca, with kind eyes and efficient movements. "How are you feeling, Mr. Mitchell?" "I don't know." The honesty surprised me. "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel." She paused in recording my blood pressure, looked at me with unexpected understanding. "Dr. Harrison told me what happened. About your children. He shouldn't have." "Maybe not." She finished writing, hung the chart back on its hook. "But for what it's worth, I see a lot of families in here. You'd be surprised how often the people we expect to show up don't, and the people we don't expect do." After she left, I thought about that. About Mrs. Patterson, who'd found me and called 911, who'd probably saved my life. We'd been neighbors for 15 years, but our relationship consisted mostly of waves across the lawn and small talk about weather and property values. Yet she'd checked on me, had a key to my house for emergencies. Noticed when I didn't pick up my morning paper. Daniel and Rebecca lived 40 minutes away. 15 miles. Less than a tank of gas. And they couldn't even donate blood. The thought that came next was cold and clear, crystallizing in my mind with the absolute certainty of mathematics. They don't deserve a single dollar of what I've built. I pressed the call button for the nurse. "Could you do me a favor?" I asked when she appeared. "I need to make a phone call." "To my attorney." Stephen Markham had been my lawyer for 23 years, ever since Helen and I bought the house. He'd handled our wills, our property transfers, various legal minutiae over the decades. He was thorough, discreet, and perhaps most importantly, he didn't ask unnecessary questions. He arrived the next morning, briefcase in hand, looking concerned. "Robert." He pulled up the visitor's chair. "The nurse said it was urgent." "What's happened?" "I need to change my will." Stephen's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of professional interest in his eyes. "All right, what changes did you have in mind?" "I want to disinherit Daniel and Rebecca. Completely. Everything goes to charity." Now his expression did change. Surprise, then calculation. "That's a significant decision. Are you certain?" "More certain than I've been about anything in years." "May I ask what prompted this?" I told him. About the dinner, about the demand for money, about the heart attack. About Dr. Harrison's phone calls and my children's responses. Stephen listened without interrupting, his lawyer's face giving nothing away. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That's unconscionable," he said finally. "I'm sorry, Robert. I truly am. Can you do it? The changes?" "Yes." He opened his briefcase, pulled out a legal pad. "It's your estate. You have absolute right to distribute it as you see fit. But I want to make sure you understand the implications." Pennsylvania law doesn't require you to leave anything to your adult children, but they can contest the will on grounds of undue influence or lack of mental capacity. Given your recent health crisis, then make it airtight. My voice came out harder than I intended. Whatever you need to do, witnesses, psychological evaluations, video testimony, I'll do it. I want this will to be unbreakable. Stephen nodded slowly. I'll draft it today. We'll have it notarized here in the hospital with 2 nurses as witnesses. I'll also recommend we have Dr. Harrison provide a statement regarding your mental competency at the time of signing. What about the charities? Which organizations did you have in mind? I thought about that. About Helen, who'd volunteered at the Children's Hospital every Tuesday for 10 years. About the homeless shelter where we'd served Thanksgiving dinners. About the women's refuge she'd helped establish after her friend escaped an abusive marriage. The Children's Hospital Foundation. The Pittsburgh Homeless Initiative. The domestic violence shelter on Maple Street. Split it evenly between them. Stephen wrote quickly. Current estate value? The house is worth about $800,000. I have $273,000 in savings and investments. The life insurance is another $150,000. So approximately $1.2 million, less estate taxes and final expenses. Yes. And you're absolutely certain? I looked at the ceiling tiles again. Counted them again. 43 tiles. 43 years of being a father. 43 years of sacrifice and love and hope. Yes, I said. I'm certain. Stephen worked quickly. By that afternoon, he returned with the documents, crisp legal pages filled with whereas and hereto and other terms that translated my anger and hurt into legally binding language. Dr. Harrison provided a signed statement attesting to my mental clarity. 2 nurses witnessed my signature, their names carefully printed below mine. When does this take effect? I asked as Stephen gathered the papers. Immediately upon signature, though it only matters upon your death. He paused. Robert, you should know. If you reconcile with your children, you can change this again. I won't. Still, the option exists. After he left, I felt lighter. Not happy exactly, but unburdened. As if I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten it was there, and only now felt its absence. The next 2 days passed in a blur of medical procedures, physical therapy, and gradually improving vital signs. Dr. Harrison pronounced me stable enough to be discharged, though he recommended rest and monitoring. No stress, he said, signing the discharge papers. Your heart needs time to heal. I almost laughed. No stress. As if that was an option. Before I left, I did one final thing. I took a piece of hospital stationery and wrote a letter. Not a long one. My children didn't deserve lengthy explanations. Just facts presented clearly. Daniel and Rebecca, by the time you read this, I will have left the hospital. Dr. Harrison informed me of your responses to his calls during my cardiac emergency. Your exact words, "That's his problem," have clarified something I should have understood years ago. You have never loved me as a father. You have loved my wallet. The evidence is overwhelming. Every visit accompanied by financial requests, every phone call leading to demands for money, every interaction transactional rather than familial. I have spent 43 years sacrificing for you both. I have given you everything: education, homes, cars, business investments, wedding costs. I did this believing it was what fathers do for children they love. Your actions during my medical crisis have shown me the truth. I was a resource to be exploited, nothing more. Therefore, I have taken action. My will has been changed. You are both completely disinherited. Everything, the house, the savings, the life insurance, goes to charitable organizations that will use it to help people who genuinely need it. This decision is final and legally airtight. Do not attempt to contest it. You will lose. I am not doing this out of spite or revenge. I am doing this because it is right. The money I worked for, that your mother and I built together, will go to people who deserve it. Not to children who couldn't be bothered to donate blood to save their father's life. You made your choice. This is mine. Robert Mitchell. I sealed the envelope and left it on my hospital bed, propped against the pillow where it couldn't be missed. Then I called a taxi and checked myself out. The driver was chatty, talking about the weather and the Steelers and his daughter's upcoming graduation. I half listened, watching the familiar streets of my town roll past. The grocery store where Helen and I shopped every Saturday. The park where I'd push Daniel and Rebecca on the swings. The library where we'd spent countless afternoons. Every location held memories, good ones, from before everything turned transactional. I'd lived in this town for 45 years, raised my family here, buried my wife here. Now I was taking back my life. The taxi dropped me at my house. Mrs. Patterson was on her porch, watering her geraniums. "Robert." She set down the watering can, hurried over. "You're home. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you. And thank you for calling 911. Dr. Harrison said you saved my life." She waved it off, but her cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Just being neighborly. That's what we do, isn't it? Look out for each other." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what we do." Inside, the house felt different. Smaller, maybe, or just less suffocating. I'd been worried it would feel haunted by Helen's memory, by the ghosts of my children's childhoods, but instead it felt like mine. I spent the afternoon cleaning. Not the quick tidy-up I usually did, but a deep, thorough purge. I went through closets, pulling out items I hadn't touched in years. Rebecca's old cheerleading uniform, Daniel's baseball trophies, photo albums from birthday parties and school plays. I didn't throw them away. That felt too much like anger, like I was trying to erase them. Instead, I boxed everything carefully and carried it to the basement. The past, preserved but not on display. The photograph from the state fair, the one with the cotton candy and the stuffed bear I kept. Not on the mantle anymore, but in a drawer in my bedroom. A reminder of what I'd hoped for and what had actually been. My phone rang that evening. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring, then ring again. 5 calls in 20 minutes, each one ignored. Finally, a text. "Dad, we need to talk. This is insane." Then Rebecca, "Please call us. We can fix this." Then Daniel again, "You're making a mistake. We're your children." I turned off the phone. 2 days later, my phone was back on and the calls had intensified. Dozens of voicemails, increasingly desperate. I listened to the first few. "Daniel, Dad, I know you're upset. We should have handled things better. But you can't just disinherit us. That money is our inheritance. Mom would have wanted us to have it." Rebecca, "Daddy, please. I'm sorry. We were wrong. Can we please just talk? I love you. We both love you." Daniel again, "This is insane. You can't do this. I've consulted with a lawyer and we have grounds to contest. Don't make this ugly." The threats came quicker after that. Legal action. Claims of undue influence. Suggestions that I wasn't mentally competent. I called Stephen. "Let them try," he said calmly. "We have Dr. Harrison's statement. We have witnesses. We have the documentation of their refusal to help during your medical emergency. Any judge who sees this case will uphold your will. They're going to make this difficult. Probably. But Robert, you're not doing anything wrong. It's your estate. You earned it. You have every right to distribute it as you see fit." That night, I slept better than I had in months. 3 days after I'd left the hospital, Daniel and Rebecca showed up at my house. I watched from the window as they got out of Daniel's BMW. The one I'd helped him make the down payment on 2 years ago when his credit was shot from poor financial decisions. They knocked. I didn't answer. "Dad." Daniel's voice came through the door. "We know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Open up." I sat in my living room, silent as stone. "This is ridiculous." Rebecca now, her voice high and strained. "You can't ignore us forever." Could. I was discovering I absolutely could. They banged on the door for 15 minutes before giving up. I watched them argue in the driveway, Daniel gesturing angrily, Rebecca crying, both of them the picture of wounded children who couldn't understand why their father was being so unreasonable. But they didn't look like children. They looked like adults who just realized their meal ticket was canceled. After they left, I made myself dinner. A simple meal, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. The kind of thing Helen and I used to make on lazy Sunday mornings when the kids were at sleepovers and we had the house to ourselves. The silence was profound, not empty, peaceful. My phone rang. Daniel. This time I answered. Dad. Relief flooded his voice. Finally. We need to. I know what you need, I said calmly. You need money. You've always needed money. That's all I've ever been to you both. A bank with paternal obligations. That's not true. Yes, it is. And I'm done pretending otherwise. Dad, if this is about the blood donation, it's about everything. The blood donation was just the final piece of evidence I needed to see clearly. We can explain. I don't want explanations. I want you both to understand something very clearly. You are disinherited. Completely. When I die, you get nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not a single dollar. Everything goes to charity. Silence on the other end. Then, you can't do this. I already have. The will is changed, signed, notarized, and filed. It's done. We'll contest it. His voice had turned cold. We'll fight this. You'll lose. I have documentation of everything. Dr. Harrison's statement about your refusal to help. Witnesses to my mental competency. Video testimony if needed. You can try to contest, but it will cost you more in legal fees than you'll ever recover. More silence. Dad. Rebecca's voice now. She must have grabbed the phone. Daddy, please. We're sorry. We made mistakes. We were wrong. But you can't just erase us. You erased yourselves, I said quietly. When you decided your father dying was his problem, you made your choice. This is mine. We love you. No, I said. You don't. And I'm finally accepting that. I hung up. They called back immediately. I sent it to voicemail. They called again. Again. I blocked both numbers. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of peace. I settled into a new routine: physical therapy for my heart 3 times a week, coffee with Mrs. Patterson on Tuesday mornings, a men's group at the community center on Thursdays. I started volunteering at the homeless shelter, the same one where Helen and I used to serve Thanksgiving dinners. The work was simple: serving meals, sorting donations, occasionally talking with the residents. But it felt meaningful in a way my relationship with my children never had. These were people who appreciated help because they genuinely needed it, not because they felt entitled to it. One evening, I was cleaning up after the dinner service when Marcus, one of the regular volunteers, sat down beside me. You're new here, right? Robert. Yes, started a few weeks ago. Helen's husband? I looked at him surprised. You knew Helen? Everyone knew Helen. She was something special. Always had a kind word, always remembered names. When my sister was trying to get out of a bad situation, Helen helped her find a place at the women's shelter. Probably saved her life. I'd known about Helen's volunteer work, of course. But hearing someone else talk about her impact hit differently. She was special, I agreed. She'd be proud of you, Marcus said, carrying on her work. Walking home that night, I thought about legacy, about what we leave behind. Daniel and Rebecca thought legacy was money, assets, tangible things they could inherit and spend. But Helen's legacy was in the women she'd helped escape abuse, in the children whose hospital stays were brightened by her visits, in the homeless families she'd served with dignity and respect. That was worth more than any bank account. A month after changing my will, Stephen called. They've hired a lawyer, he said. Sent a formal letter threatening to contest the will. Let them. The lawyer is suggesting we settle. They're willing to accept 25% of the estate in exchange for dropping the contest. No. Robert, I should mention, fighting a will contest, even one you'll likely win, can be expensive. Could take years. The legal fees could consume a significant portion of the estate. Then let it. My voice was firm. Every dollar spent fighting them is a dollar they'll never see. I'd rather burn the money than give it to them. Stephen was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll inform their counsel that we reject any settlement and intend to vigorously defend the will. Thank you. One more thing, they're claiming undue influence. saying that someone must have convinced you to make these changes while you were vulnerable after your heart attack. I laughed, came out bitter. The only people who influenced me were them. Their own actions, their own words. That's exactly what I'll tell the judge if it comes to that. It didn't come to that. 2 weeks later, Stephen called again. They've dropped the contest. Really? Their lawyer did a cost-benefit analysis. The evidence is overwhelmingly in our favor, Dr. Harrison's statement. The witnesses, your documented mental competency. Fighting it would cost them easily $100,000 in legal fees with virtually no chance of success. So that's it. That's it. The will stands as written. I should have felt victorious, triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Thank you, Stephen. You did the right thing, Robert. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you did. That night, I took out the photograph from the state fair. Looked at those 2 children with their cotton candy grins and bright eyes. Tried to remember who they'd been before they became who they are. The memory was there, but it felt distant, like looking at strangers. I put the photo back in the drawer. The months that followed brought a kind of freedom I hadn't expected. Without the constant weight of my children's demands and disappointments, I found space to breathe, to think, to decide what I actually wanted from the years I had left. Recovery from the accident took time. My left arm was stiff for weeks, the deep scars a permanent reminder of that night. But I healed. Slowly, steadily, I regained my strength and independence. I increased my volunteer work once I was fully mobile again. Started a reading program at the homeless shelter, teaching basic literacy to adults who'd never learned. Helped organize a fundraiser for the domestic violence shelter. Joined the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation. I met with Stephen quarterly to review the charitable distributions, ensuring the money would be properly allocated after my death. He helped me set up some provisions for immediate grants: $50,000 to the Children's Hospital for a new playground, $30,000 to the homeless shelter for winter coats and supplies. You could do more of this now, Stephen suggested during one meeting. You don't have to wait until you're gone. Make some of these distributions while you're alive, see the impact firsthand. So I did. I funded a scholarship program at the local community college. Full tuition for 3 students from low-income families. I attended the award ceremony and met the recipients. A single mother going back to school, a young man who'd aged out of foster care, a recent immigrant working 2 jobs while pursuing her education. They thanked me with tears in their eyes. Real gratitude, not the performative kind my children had mastered. You're changing my life, the single mother said, gripping my hand. My kids will see me graduate. They'll know education matters. That was worth more than any Father's Day card Daniel and Rebecca had ever given me. 8 months after the accident, I ran into Rebecca at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, examining avocados with the careful attention of someone for whom grocery money matters. Our eyes met across the display of apples. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked over, her cartwheels squeaking slightly. Dad. Rebecca. She looked thinner, tired. Her designer purse had been replaced with something more practical. The expensive highlights in her hair had grown out. How are you? She asked. Good. You? Fine. She didn't look fine. Brandon and I separated. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? The question came out sharp. You didn't exactly approve of him. I didn't know him well enough to approve or disapprove. He was always on his phone. A faint smile crossed her face. There and gone. Yeah. Turns out he was texting his assistant. They're engaged now. I'm sorry, I said again, and meant it. The business never happened. Too much startup cost, not enough capital. We lost the money we did invest. I didn't ask how much, didn't offer to help, just nodded. Daniel's restaurant failed again, she continued. Different concept, same result. He's working as a consultant now, but the money's not great. I hope things work out for you both. She looked at me for a long moment. Do you? Really? Yes. But not enough to change the will. No, not enough for that. Her eyes filled with tears. We made mistakes, Dad. We were selfish and ungrateful and cruel. But we're still your children. Biologically, yes. That's it? Biology. What about family? Family, I said carefully, is supposed to be people who show up for each other, who donate blood when you're dying, who love you for who you are, not what you can provide. We were scared, she whispered. When Dr. Harrison called, we didn't know how to handle it. We panicked. For 9 months, I kept my voice gentle but firm. Rebecca, I didn't hear from either of you after the doctor called. Not a card, not a phone call, nothing. Until you found out about the will. She looked down at her cart, at the practical items, store-brand cereal, discounted meat, wilting lettuce from the markdown rack. I know, she said finally. I know we failed you, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry. I believe you. Hope flickered in her eyes. Then, but being sorry doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't change the years of using me as an ATM. It doesn't make me forget hearing that my dying was my problem. The hope died. So that's it? We apologize and you just don't forgive us. I do forgive you, I said, and realized it was true. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means accepting what happened and moving forward. Without us. Yes, without you. She nodded slowly, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. For what it's worth, I hope you're happy. I hope whatever you're doing with your life now makes you happy. It does. Good. She turned her cart, stopped, looked back. I loved you, you know. Maybe not well, maybe not enough. But I did love you. I know. I loved you too. She walked away. I watched her go, this stranger who used to be my daughter, and felt not pain exactly, not regret, just a dull ache, like an old injury on a rainy day. I finished my shopping and went home. A year after the accident, I met Stephen at a cafe downtown to finalize some paperwork on the charitable distributions. The Children's Hospital wants to name the new pediatric wing after you, he said, sliding documents across the table. The Helen and Robert Mitchell Family Wing. I'd prefer just Helen's name. Are you sure? It's a significant legacy. Helen did the work. I'm just finishing what she started. Stephen smiled. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. We finished the paperwork over coffee. Stephen told me about his daughter's college graduation, his wife's new job, his plans to semi-retire next year. Normal conversation between friends, which was what we'd become over this year of legal battles and charitable planning. As we stood to leave, Stephen said, You know, when this all started, I wasn't sure you were making the right choice. Cutting off your children seemed extreme. And now I see what you've built instead. The scholarships, the programs, the impact. You took pain and turned it into purpose. Not everyone can do that. Walking home, I thought about that. Purpose. It was something I'd been missing for years without realizing it. After Helen died, I'd poured everything into my children, making them my entire reason for existing. And when they proved unworthy of that devotion, I'd felt hollow. But I wasn't hollow anymore. I was filled with meaningful work, genuine connections, real impact. I stopped by the park, the same one where I'd pushed Daniel and Rebecca on the swings decades ago. A young father was there with his daughter, maybe 4 years old, helping her climb the ladder to the slide. Good job, sweetie, he called as she slid down, squealing with delight. Want to go again? She did. Again and again, her laughter echoing across the playground. I watched for a few minutes, remembering. Then I walked home. 2 years after the accident, I received a letter. Not from Daniel or Rebecca. I hadn't heard from either of them since the grocery store encounter. This was from someone named Sarah Mitchell, Daniel's ex-wife from a brief marriage I'd barely known about. Mr. Mitchell, you don't know me, but I was married to your son Daniel for 2 years. We divorced 5 years ago, and I've had no contact with him since. I'm writing because I recently learned about your situation with your children, and I wanted you to know something. You're not alone in seeing who they really are. During our marriage, Daniel constantly talked about your money. Not about you as a person. I heard maybe 5 stories about your actual life together. But he mentioned your assets constantly. When Dad dies, he'd say, We'll finally have the capital to do X. Or Dad's sitting on at least $1 million doing nothing. He talked about you like you were already dead. Like you were just an obstacle between him and the money he felt entitled to. I told him it was disgusting. We fought about it constantly. It was one of the reasons I left. I don't know if this helps, but I wanted you to know, your decision to disinherit them wasn't wrong. You saw clearly what I saw. Some people only value others for what they can extract. I hope you found peace. Sincerely, Sarah. I read the letter twice, then filed it away with the other documentation from this entire ordeal. It did help. Not because I needed validation. I'd made peace with my decision months ago. But because it confirmed what I'd suspected. This wasn't a recent development. My children had been planning my death, spending my money in their minds, for years. I wasn't grieving real relationships. I was grieving the illusion of relationships that had never actually existed. That night, I took out the state fair photograph one last time. Looked at those smiling children who'd become calculating adults. Traced the edges of their faces with my finger. Then I put it in an envelope and mailed it to Rebecca with a simple note. Thought you might want this. I didn't keep a copy. 3 years after the accident, the Children's Hospital held a dedication ceremony for the new pediatric wing. The Helen Mitchell family wing, despite my protests, with a small bronze plaque bearing her photo and a brief description of her volunteer work. The ceremony was attended by hospital administrators, former volunteers who'd worked with Helen, and several families whose children had been helped by the programs she'd supported. One mother approached me afterward, holding the hand of a thin girl with a scarf covering her bald head. Mr. Mitchell? I'm Teresa Gonzalez. This is my daughter, Maria. Maria smiled shyly. Maria had leukemia, Teresa explained. She's in remission now, but 2 years ago, when she was going through treatment, the playroom your wife funded was the only place she smiled. She'd spend hours there, playing with the toys, reading the books. It gave her something to focus on besides being sick. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. Your wife saved my daughter's life. Not medically, the doctors did that. But emotionally, she gave Maria a reason to keep fighting. I looked down at Maria, who was still smiling that shy smile. Helen would have been glad to know that, I said. We saw the announcement about your donation, Teresa continued. The new wing, the expanded programs. You're continuing what she started. That's beautiful. After they left, I stood in front of Helen's plaque for a long time. Stared at her photograph, the one from our 40th anniversary, where she was laughing at something outside the frame. Probably at me, making some joke while the photographer tried to get us to look serious. I think you'd approve, I said quietly, of what I'm doing with the money, of how I'm spending my time, of choosing this over them. A nurse walking past gave me an odd look, but I didn't care. I miss you, I continued, every day. But I'm not lost anymore. I know what matters now. The photograph didn't answer, of course, but I felt lighter anyway. For years after the accident, I had another health scare. Nothing as serious as the trauma from the crash, just a minor stroke that left me temporarily unable to speak clearly. 3 days in the hospital for observation and treatment. Mrs. Patterson stayed with me the entire first day. Marcus from the shelter brought flowers. The 3 scholarship recipients I'd funded visited, bringing cards they'd made themselves. Daniel and Rebecca didn't come, didn't call, probably didn't even know, and I realized I was okay with that. When Dr. Harrison came to discharge me, he said, "Your recovery is remarkable. Your body has healed incredibly well. Strong constitution. Good genes," I said, "and good reason to stick around. The charity work? Among other things, I'm teaching myself piano. Terribly, but enthusiastically." He laughed. "That's the spirit. Keep finding reasons to wake up every morning." I did. Piano lessons every Tuesday. Volunteer work every Thursday. Board meetings once a month. Coffee with Mrs. Patterson. Dinner with the men's group. A life built not on familial obligation but on genuine connection and purposeful action. 5 years after the accident, Stephen called with news. "Daniel's filed for bankruptcy," he said. Third failed business venture. He's apparently been living off credit cards for 2 years. Is he asking for help? Through intermediaries. He hasn't contacted you directly, but his lawyer reached out to mine, suggesting that perhaps family reconciliation might be possible if certain financial support were provided. In other words, he's broke and hoping I'll bail him out again. Essentially, yes. And Rebecca? Working as a receptionist, living in a small apartment, divorced, as you know. She's apparently doing okay. Nothing glamorous, but stable. That's good. Genuine stability is better than borrowed luxury. So no reconciliation? Stephen, I reconciled with reality years ago. That's enough. That night I played piano. Badly, hitting wrong notes and losing the rhythm, but with genuine joy. I was learning Für Elise, Helen's favorite piece. She used to play it flawlessly on the old upright piano we'd had in the living room before it finally gave out. I'd never be as good as her, but I was trying, and that felt like honoring her memory in a way that mattered. 6 years after the accident, I turned 80. The homeless shelter threw me a surprise party, cake from the grocery store, decorations made from construction paper, cards signed by everyone who worked or volunteered there. Marcus gave a speech. Robert came to us 6 years ago, just another volunteer, but he's become family. He's taught literacy to 47 adults. He's fundraised enough money to keep our doors open through 3 winter seasons that would have shut us down. He remembers everyone's name, everyone's story. He sees people. Everyone sang happy birthday. The cake was vanilla with chocolate frosting, store-bought but made with genuine affection. It was the best birthday I'd had in decades. Walking home that evening, I thought about family. Not the genetic lottery that had given me Daniel and Rebecca, but the chosen family I'd built. Mrs. Patterson, who checked on me daily and kept a spare key. Marcus and the other volunteers. The scholarship recipients who emailed me updates about their lives. Stephen, who'd become more friend than attorney. These were the people who'd show up if I needed them. Who'd donate blood, bring flowers, remember my birthday. This was family. 7 years after the accident, I received one final communication from my children. A joint letter, handwritten. Dad, we're writing not to ask for money or to contest the will again. We're writing to say we understand. Took us years to get here. Years of therapy, of facing our own failures, of recognizing how badly we treated you. We can't undo it. We can't erase the words we said or the actions we took. We were selfish. We were greedy. We took your love for granted and abused your generosity. You gave us everything, and we gave you nothing when you needed it most. We don't expect forgiveness. We don't expect reconciliation. We just wanted you to know that we see now what we were too blind to see then. You were a good father, the best father, and we were terrible children. We hope you're happy. We hope you've found peace. We hope the charities you've chosen do wonderful things with the money we never deserved. If this is the last communication between us, we wanted it to be this. Thank you for everything you gave us, and we're sorry we didn't deserve it. Daniel and Rebecca. I read the letter 3 times, put it in a drawer, didn't respond. Not because I didn't believe them. I did. They probably were genuinely sorry, had genuinely grown. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some relationships, once broken, can't be repaired. And that was okay. 8 years after the accident, I was sitting in my living room when the doorbell rang. Stephen stood on the porch, looking concerned. I should have called first, he said. But I wanted to tell you in person. Rebecca's in the hospital. Stage 4 breast cancer. It's terminal. The words hit harder than I expected. How long? Weeks, maybe. She's in hospice care. I sat down heavily. Does she know you're here? No. I found out through professional channels. Her lawyer is handling her affairs. Does she want to see me? I don't know. I can find out. I thought about it for a long time. Thought about Rebecca as a child, demanding another ride on the Ferris wheel. As a teenager, rolling her eyes at my jokes. As a bride, crying tears of joy in that expensive dress. As an adult, coldly refusing to help when I was dying. Tell her I'll come if she wants me to, I said finally. But only if she genuinely wants me there, not if she feels obligated. The message came back the next day. Yes, she wanted to see me. The hospice facility was peaceful, soft lighting, quiet hallways, nurses who spoke in gentle tones. Rebecca's room was at the end of the corridor, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked a garden. She looked small in the hospital bed. Thin. The cancer had ravaged her body, leaving behind a shadow of the woman I'd seen in the grocery store. Dad. Her voice was weak. I sat in the visitor's chair, didn't reach for her hand. How are you feeling? Faint smile. Like I'm dying. I'm sorry. Are you? The same question she'd asked in the grocery store, but without the edge. Just curiosity. Yes, I don't hate you, Rebecca. I never did. But you don't love me either. Not anymore. I love who you were. I mourn who you could have been. But who you are now. I don't know you well enough to love you. She nodded slowly. That's fair. We sat in silence for a while. The monitor beeped steadily. A nurse passed by, smiled, moved on. I don't have much time, Rebecca said finally. So I'm going to be honest. I don't expect you to change the will. I'm not here to beg or manipulate. I just wanted to see you one more time. Why? Because you're my father. Because even though I ruined it, even though I destroyed what we had, you're still the man who pushed me on swings and taught me to ride a bike and stayed up all night when I had the flu. She paused, struggling for breath. I wanted to remember that man. To remember that there was a time when things were good. They were good, I said quietly. Once. I'm sorry I ruined it. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. What you gave us. What we threw away. And I'm sorry. I looked at this dying woman who used to be my daughter. Saw the child in her features, the same nose, the same curve of her cheekbone. The same eyes that had looked up at me with absolute trust when she was small. I forgive you, I said, and meant it. She closed her eyes. Tears leaked from the corners. Thank you. We talked for another hour. Not about money or wills or the past hurts. About small things. The garden outside her window. A funny show she'd watched. Memories from her childhood that weren't tainted by later betrayals. When I stood to leave, she said, "Will you come back? Before the end?" Yes, if you want me to. I do. I visited 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Brought flowers from my garden. Read to her when she was too tired to talk. Held her hand during the difficult moments when pain broke through the medication. Daniel never came. I didn't ask why. Rebecca died on a Tuesday morning, peacefully, with the nurse holding one hand and me holding the other. At her funeral, a small service, barely a dozen people, I delivered a brief eulogy. Not about the woman she'd become, but about the child she'd been. The girl who loved yellow roses and Ferris wheels and cotton candy. The daughter who'd once believed her father could fix anything. She made mistakes, I said to the gathered mourners. We all do. But she was also capable of genuine remorse, of real change. That counts for something. After the service, Daniel approached. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. Thank you, he said, for being there for her at the end. She was my daughter. Was. The tense doesn't matter anymore. He nodded slowly. I know I don't have the right to ask, but are you happy with how things turned out? I thought about that. About my piano lessons and volunteer work and chosen family. About the charities doing good work with money that would have been wasted on bailouts and business ventures. About Helen's legacy living on in the hospital wing and the shelter and the scholarships. Yes, I said. I am. Good. He turned to leave, then looked back. For what it's worth, she was right. You were a good father. We were terrible children. You were children, I said. You became terrible adults. There's a difference. After he left, I stood in the cemetery for a long time, staring at the fresh grave next to Helen's. My children, the dream of them, the reality of them, the loss of them, finally laid to rest. I thought about that photograph from the state fair one last time. About those smiling children who'd grown into people I couldn't recognize. about the years of hope and sacrifice and disappointment. Then I let it go. Not with anger, not with regret, just with acceptance. This was my life now, meaningful work, genuine connections, purpose beyond obligation. I walked out of the cemetery into the bright afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in years. 9 years after the accident, I was teaching piano to a young girl from the scholarship program. She was struggling with fur elise, hitting the wrong notes, getting frustrated. "It's okay," I told her. "The point isn't perfection. It's practice. It's trying. But it sounds terrible. It sounds like learning. That's beautiful in its own way." She tried again, hit the same wrong notes. But this time she smiled. That evening, sitting on my porch with coffee and the sunset painting the sky orange and pink, Mrs. Patterson called over from her yard. "Beautiful evening." "Perfect," I agreed. "I'm making too much pot roast for one person. Want to come over for dinner?" "I'd love to." We ate on her patio, talking about nothing important and everything meaningful. The weather, our gardens, her grandson's graduation, my piano student's progress. Normal conversation between friends who chose each other. Later, walking home in the gathering dark, I passed the house where I'd raised my children, where Helen and I had built our life, where I'd learned the difference between being needed and being loved. The lights were on in someone else's windows now. I'd sold the house the previous year, downsized to a small apartment near the shelter, kept only what mattered: Helen's recipe cards, a few photographs, the things that told the story of who we'd been together. The rest, the weight of it, the expectation of it, the obligation of it, I'd let go. I thought about Daniel and Rebecca sometimes. Wondered if Daniel had ever found stability, if he'd learned anything from Rebecca's death. But I didn't reach out, didn't check. Some chapters close, some doors lock, some relationships end not with dramatic confrontation but with quiet acceptance. And that was okay, because I'd found something better than familial obligation. Chosen connection, earned trust, meaningful purpose. I'd found peace. 10 years after the accident, on the anniversary of the day that changed everything, I visited Helen's grave, brought her favorite yellow roses, sat on the bench nearby. "I did it," I told her. "Built the life you would have wanted. Not easy, not simple, but real, meaningful, good." The wind rustled through the trees. A bird sang somewhere overhead. "The money's going to help so many people. The scholarships, the shelters, the hospital. You'd be proud of what we're building together." Together, because even though she was gone, this was still our legacy, our impact, our love turned into action. I sat there for an hour just being present, remembering the good times, and there had been so many good times. The laughter, the quiet moments, the partnership that had been the foundation of my life. When I finally stood to leave, I felt her presence. Not literally, I didn't believe in ghosts, but in the way the work continued, in the lives being changed, in the choice to turn pain into purpose. That was her legacy, and mine. Walking away from the cemetery for what I somehow knew would be the last time, I felt complete. My story with Daniel and Rebecca had ended in loss and acceptance. My story with Helen had ended in death and continuation. But my story, my own story, separate from my role as husband or father, was still being written. And it was good. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments below.